Welcome along to this morning's Planning and Rights of Way Committee. I'm Councillor Richard Butler, the Chairman of the committee, and other councillors here today are Councillors Fielding, my Vice Chairman, Councillors Camilleri, Corden, Henshaw, Meakin, Ogle, Owen, Podew-Horan, Smith and Upton. So good morning everybody, and we welcome Councillor Podew-Horan as well, who's joining the committee on a permanent basis, so welcome. And so if we go into the first item on the agenda, I will remind you we're on YouTube, so being broadcast live. And so if we have the minutes of the last meeting held on the 14th of September, are we happy to note those? Thank you. And we also have a slightly different way of working. We have officers and others online as well this morning. So we need to go to apologies for absence, please. And so that's Pete. Is Pete Barker online?
Yes, I am, Chair. Thank you very much. So we've had apologies from Councillor Creamer and from Councillor Williamson. And as you state, Councillor Podew-Horan replaces Councillor Moxon on a permanent basis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so we now go on to item 3, declarations of interest. Do any members or officers present have any disclosable pecuniary interest to declare? And or any officers or members present have any private interests, pecuniary or non-pecuniary, to declare? I suspect not. Thank you. Perhaps I should also have just asked officers to introduce yourselves for the record as well, both those in the room and those online. So, Mrs. Gill, please.
Thank you. I'm Sally Gill, Group Manager Planning, and I'd like to give Jonathan Smith apologies because he's off poorly at the moment, so I'm his late replacement. And online I have Mike Hankin.
Indeed, we do. We can see you,
yes.
Mike.
I'm here online as a late replacement. Councillor Day's leave to be here to answer a few questions for you if needed.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. And item 4, do any members have any instances of lobbying to declare? No? Okay, thank you. So, this takes us into we have one application on the agenda today, which is the retrospective permission for sand extraction at restoration at Ratchet Hill Quarry, Mansfield. I'll formally move the recommendations on page 29. Have a seconder, please.
Second it and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Fielding. So, we will ask Mrs. Gill, please, to talk us through the item. Please, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I begin my presentation, can I just draw members' attention to paragraph 71? We've just realised there is a word missing right at the end of the paragraph, and the missing word I believe is impacts. So if you can just add that to your notes, but then I'll move on to my presentation. And this is to consider a retrospective planning application for the extraction of 558 tonnes of silica sand from Ratchet Hill Quarry and to approve a revised restoration scheme for the site. Ratchet Hill Quarry is located approximately 4 kilometres of Mansfield town centre, and it's accessed via an existing quarry access roadway from the 6191. The sand quarry entered production in 1959, with mineral extraction ceasing in 2016 following the exhaustion of mineral reserves and with the opening of a replacement quarry at Two Oaks Quarry near Kirkby in Ashfield. Full planning permission is sought to retrospectively regularise the extraction of an additional 558,000 tonnes of mineral. The additional mineral has been obtained by excavating to a greater depth in the southeastern extension area shown in slide 3, across an area measuring 7.05 hectares. The additional extraction has lowered ground levels within this part of the site to an average depth of 5 metres below the water table. Since the publication of the report, it has been noticed that in paragraphs 16A, 66 and condition 1 in error make reference to the extraction of 528,000 tonnes of mineral rather than the 558 tonnes of minerals, as is the case. The application also wishes to agree a revised restoration scheme for the wider quarry area as illustrated on slide 4. The revised restoration scheme incorporates changes to the site contours to reflect the deeper excavations in the eastern extension area, larger areas of open water habitat, retention of areas of reed bed and self-set woodland, retention of cliff faces around the perimeter of the quarry, and the establishment of new heathland and acid grassland habitats. During the course of processing the planning applications, modifications have been made to the design of the restoration scheme, most notably the removal of a proposed area of industrial development from the restoration scheme, recontouring of the land immediately south of the northern lake to slacken off gradients, and modifications to the habitats proposed within the restoration scheme to enhance the site's biodiversity. Application publicity has resulted in no objections being received from Mansfield District Council, the Environment Agency, Natural England, the County Council's own flood risk team, Highways, Nature Conservation, Severn Trent Water and via Reclamation. Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust have objected to the scheme, raising concerns that the revisions to the restoration scheme reduces the area of new heathland habitat to the detriment of the ecological value of the restored site. The landowner of the adjoining Ransom Wood Business Park does not object, but would like to see the restored site receive 10 years aftercare management and opportunities taken to enhance the water quality within the lakes on the site and the retention of boundary fences around the site. In terms of the assessment of the planning merits of the development, at the time the additional 558,000 tonnes of sand were extracted at Ratchet Hill Quarry, the consented reserves at the quarry were exhausted, and the replacement site at Two Oaks Quarry near Kirkby in Ashfield had not entered production due to unforeseen delays, including delays in obtaining planning permission. While it is disappointed that the additional mineral extraction was undertaken without the benefit of permission, it is acknowledged that the company had to make a commercial decision at this time to maintain the continuity of their business, including the employment of 41 members of staff and the wider continuity of the supply of the silica sand to industry. It is acknowledged that the company entered into some informal communications with NCC office at this time, wherein it is acknowledged that the company had little option but to excavate the site to a greater depth and retrospectively seek approval at a later date. The continuity of mineral supplies and economic considerations are a material consideration in the determination of planning applications, with a raft of planning policies within the National Planning Policy Framework and the Nottinghamshire Minerals Local Plan, which stress the importance of maintaining a sufficient supply of minerals and the great weight that should be given to the economic benefits of mineral extraction in planning decisions. Whilst undertaking the works in advance of obtaining planning permission has bypassed the normal planning process, which informs the design of mineral extraction schemes and could potentially have assisted in developing a scheme which was ecologically superior, officers' balanced view is that the economic arguments and the continuity of maintaining mineral supplies outweighs any harm to the ecological value of the restoration of the eastern extension area. With regard to the modifications to the restoration of the quarry site, the revised scheme has been designed having regard to the existing ground conditions, availability of restoration materials, and the level of natural regeneration that the quarry has undergone since its closure. The revised restoration scheme is generally consistent with the scheme originally approved and will deliver a mosaic of heathland, acid grassland, naturally establishing woodland, wetland and open water bodies, which will provide valuable habitat and biodiversity gains and long-term enhancements to the environment, in keeping with the wider objectives for habitat, biodiversity and landscape enhancements within the wider Sherwood Forest area. The revised restoration scheme therefore benefits from policy support from the Nottinghamshire Minerals Local Plan Strategic Policy SP2, which seeks to maintain biodiversity gains associated with minerals development, and Policy DM12, which requires that minerals development must include an appropriate scheme for the restoration, aftercare and long-term after use of mineral sites. Planning conditions are recommended to regulate the completion of the final restoration works and thereafter manage the site for a 20-year aftercare period, twice the length of time that is secured through the existing planning permission. The recommendation, therefore, is to grant permission subject to the conditions set out within Appendix 2 of the report, subject to a modification to Condition 1 to reference 558,000 tonnes of mineral extracted. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mrs Gill. And I'll ask for any questions of clarification at this point. But just before, I'll ask the first one, actually. Can we just be clear about the number of tonnes here? Because in part of the report it says 528,000 tonnes and 558. And I know you've verbally said 558. But then just to confirm, when one looks at page 31, Appendix 1, which are the conditions, in paragraph 1 it says 528,000. So I presume that will need amending for the record, and any reference to 528 should be 558. Is that correct?
It should be 558, and that condition will be amended.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any points of clarification at this stage? Okay, so we have a guest speaker for this item, which is Mr. Aldridge, Mark Aldridge, who is from the Mansfield Sand Company. So welcome. We've seen you before, haven't we, at these meetings? So you have, how long is it up to? Yes, now, do we need to formally read out the guidance notes? Mr. Barker, for the record, Mr. Barker, could you just remind everyone of the rules regarding timings, etc., please?
Yes, I can, Chair. Thank you. So, Mr. Aldridge, you will have a maximum of 3 minutes to speak, and notice will be given to you when the final minute of your allotted time has arrived by my saying 1 minute. You should not introduce new material, be that plan, photographs or written documents, and only issues relevant to the Plan A application should be addressed in the presentation. These include impact on local residents and the environment, relevant planning policies and government guidance. You should not refer to non-planning issues such as property rights, covenants, loss of property value or view. Members of the committee may ask you questions for the purposes of clarification, and the chair will invite the relevant officer to respond to any factual matters raised by your presentation or subsequent questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Barker. So, Mr. Aldridge, over to you. You have up to 3 minutes to address us. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, Chairman. The Mansfield Sand Company Limited is a family-run business which has extracted, processed and sold silica sand products in the Mansfield area since 1840. The company has a total of 87 full-time staff, of which 41 jobs rely directly upon the sand extraction process. The company have operated many quarries in Mansfield: Rock Quarry, Litchfield Quarry and the quarry at Sandhurst Avenue, which became the company's brickworks in 1926 and then its head office. Then came Berry Hill and Ratchet Hill and the present quarry at Two Oaks. The company has recently won the Nottinghamshire Live Business Award for the Company of the Year. As the sand reserves were becoming exhausted at Ratchet Hill, the company commenced a search for a new site in 2008, and negotiations were completed for the Two Oaks site in 2009. A planning application and an associated environmental assessment was submitted in March 2020, and during the planning process, a candidate special protection area SPA for nightjar and woodlark emerged, covering the whole of the Sherwood Forest area. As a result, further significant specialist ecological studies were insisted upon by the Wildlife Trust to prove that the new workings would not impact upon the nightjar and woodlark. This SPA suggestion caused considerable delays, almost 2 years in the planning process. During this time, the company had no other source of sand, and if extraction ceased, the business was faced with complete failure and the loss of 87 jobs. Further, all contractors and hauliers who derive a living from the quarry would be adversely affected. The new quarry at Two Oaks was finally granted consent in 2012 and developed in 2014. As a result of deepening extraction area, the original restoration proposed for mainly dry heathland was not possible, as insufficient sand remained to completely backfill the workings. This has resulted in a new restoration design which does contribute a significant area to dry heathland, but retains some water bodies. The working of the site to lower levels has not led to any environmental concerns, apart from the variation to the restoration landform. The new quarry at Two Oaks produces a range of specialist industrial construction sands and specialist fibre sand products, and the top-dressing football pitches within the UK, including prestigious grounds such as Notts County, Nottingham Forest, Leicester City, and the vast majority of the Premiership clubs. The applicants have undertaken a number of investments at the site, and all operations remain as approved by the Nottinghamshire County Council. There is good working relationship with the Minerals Office of the county, and regular inspections take place to ensure the site continues to operate in accordance with planning and environmental controls. It is considered that revised restoration process at Ratchet Hill is acceptable, and there will be no environmental harm associated with the restoration proposed. The applicants have specifically agreed a long aftercare period that would normally be accepted in order to ensure the final restoration can be achieved satisfactorily. The site already has a wealth of habitats, and sand martins and a pair of peregrine falcons nest in the higher sand faces, protected by the water areas, which do not allow access to their nesting areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aldridge. So, members, do you have any questions of points of clarification? This isn't debate, just points of clarification with Mr. Aldridge. No? Okay, and colleagues, do you have any?
I don't, but whether Mr. Hankin does.
Mr. Hankin, do you have any points of clarification?
No, I have nothing to raise. I'd just like to come in on one point about the recommendation. I was reading through the report this morning, and I note condition 11 requires the submission of a restoration scheme by the 28th of February 2023. I think that's a typo, and that should read 2022. And the reason I say that is condition 3 requires the aftercare scheme to be implemented by the, I believe it's the 1st of June 2022. So if that's condition 11 is read the submission of an aftercare scheme on the February 23, we'd have the aftercare scheme effectively after the implementation, it's required to be implemented by conditions 2. So in terms of the recommendation, can I also request we remove a modification to the wording in condition 11 so that it requires the submission of the aftercare scheme on or before the 28th of February 2022 rather than 2023 as listed in the report.
Thank you, Mr. Hankin. Yes, well spotted. So I would think that colleagues will be happy to have that, because it makes it's be nonsense to not, wouldn't it, given the date that we've got to get this scheme in agreed. So thank you very much for that. So we can now open up for discussion, debate and decision. So any questions, comments? Councillor Owen, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. As has been pointed out on more than one occasion, this is a retrospective planning approval, and I dislike retrospective planning applications and approvals intensely because I think it undermines the planning process. I think it brings the planning system into disrepute, and I think it also undermines public confidence and trust in the whole process, because we are in a situation here where we have got no choice but to grant approval. Had it been something that had been built and we didn't like it and we weren't going to give it planning permission, we could say no, and you've got to take down what you've put up that you shouldn't have put up without planning permission. But we're not in a position to ask for the return of over 500,000 tonnes of sand. And I find the reasons for not applying for planning permission for an extension to the existing planning permission rather spurious, quite honestly. The fact that another site wasn't coming on stream at the time the company felt that it was going to, okay, that's it. But they knew that they were getting to the end of the planning permission as far as this particular site is concerned, and should have submitted a planning permission or a planning application at that time, which may well have been approved. We don't know. I note from what Mrs. Gill said that there were informal communications with Nottinghamshire County Council, but we don't know what those informal communications were. I would have expected those informal communications to have said, you are at the end of your planning approval, you need to put another one in, and if you try it on, we'll start to take enforcement action against you. That's what I would have expected those informal communications to have said. And I think Mrs. Gill also said the opportunity has been lost, and correct me if I'm wrong, the opportunity has been lost as a result of a planning application not being submitted at that time and the company operating without the benefit of planning permission. We've lost the opportunity to have an ecologically superior restoration. So it's not just a case of nodding something through and everything's okay. We've lost out. The community's lost out. The county council's lost out because we've not had that ecologically superior restoration that we could have had. I understand that there was to be a restoration of heathland, and we're told that that is not now possible. Now, had a proper application been put in at that time, it may well have been possible to have worked with the company to have ensured that far more heathland was made available. So I find this is totally unsatisfactory. I accept there's very little we can do. It really is necessary for government in its consultations over changes to the planning system to give local authorities powers or greater powers to deal with these retrospective planning permissions, because, as I say, this sort of thing undermines public trust and public confidence. And that is pretty low with planners and planning permissions at the moment, I'm afraid. And this does nothing to enhance the situation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Very clear, and I understand completely what you're saying about the dislike of retrospective applications for the reasons you mentioned. But as you also hint, the law of the land, the planning law and all the rest of it is the fact that even though an application is retrospective, we are not able to give that particular weight to the actual decision-making process. But I do share your frustration. I understand completely. Mrs. Gill or Mrs. Hankin, do you want to come back on those points, any of the other points that Councillor Owens raised, please?
I'll defer to Mr. Hankin.
Thank you, Mrs. Gill. Yeah. The company had applied for planning permission for the replacement site at Two Oaks Quarry well before the site at Ratchet Hill was exhausted. As referenced in Mrs. Gill's report, there were delays in getting the planning permission for that site. Principally, the announcement that there was a potential special protection area designated for the wider Sherwood Forest area, and the company had to enlist some further ecological assessment work to their Two Oaks application. That delayed it planning permission by, I believe it was about a couple of years, and that is the reason why the company could not go into their new site when Ratchet Hill closed. In terms of the informal discussions, they were quite informal. There was a meeting with officers of the council and the company where they basically said, what do? We have little option, and the company said they were proposing to go deeper. Officers acknowledged that the company had little option to go deeper. And I think we were mindful of the employment implications. The presentation by Mr. Aldridge outlines that I think this quarry employs 43 people and there's 87 in the wider company or thereabouts. Effectively, if they had to close production, it would have been the loss of those jobs. The company's been established in the Mansfield area for, I believe, nearly 100 years, and that would have been a very difficult decision for officers to take. The restoration scheme which we have in front of us, it does take account of the modifications which have been made from going deeper. There is more water in there, but you know, and there is a loss of heathland habitat within the site. But you know, paragraph 49 of the report sets out that the original objective for Ratchet Hill Quarry and its restoration was to create a mosaic of woodland, scrub, acid grassland and heathland. And what the company have created, the restoration scheme we have is effectively a mosaic of habitats. It does provide valuable ecological habitat, not quite as much heathland as what was originally proposed, but the habitat which is created is still valuable. Ultimately, the decision on this, it is a balanced decision that yes, the restoration scheme is yeah, there is less heathland in there, but we have to balance that against the economic priorities of the decision the company had to make at the time. And in particular, I would draw, you know, in looking at that balance, paragraph 68 sets out effectively the weight which planners we should give to the economic considerations of the development. NPPF paragraph 209 requires that there should be a sufficient supply of minerals, which if this site had ceased production, the wooden, you know, silica sand production would have effectively halted with the company. And in particular paragraph 211 of the NPPF, which says that we should give great weight to the benefits of mineral extraction, including its benefits to the economy. Yeah, it is unfortunate that they have extracted more mineral here, but as you know, taken in the round, you know, the recommendation is to grant planning permission, because as officers we feel that we would have granted this planning permission even if it wasn't a retrospective application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hankin. Yeah, that's Councillor Owen, you want to come back on this, don't you?
Yeah, well, those sound just like the arguments that President Bolsonaro of Brazil is making for logging the Amazon rainforest. I'm not suggesting that Mansfield is anything like the Amazon rainforest, but perhaps you're working towards it. I don't know. And quite frankly, it was not a decision that officers should have been taking. It's a decision that members should have been taking and should have been consulted upon. So I'm even more annoyed now about the situation that we find ourselves in. There is no explanation as to whether or not a new application or an extended application could have been put in to have extended, as we've got now retrospectively, but we could have had the benefits of a better restoration. The whole thing is a complete mess, and I am extremely unhappy with it, and there certainly lessons need to be learned from this.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Now, I've a sudden rush of hands going up here. The first one I saw was Councillor Henshaw, then I think I saw Councillor Ogle, and then Councillor Camilleri. So Councillor Henshaw, then Councillor Camilleri, and then Councillor Upton.
Thanks, Chair, for bringing Henshaw, please. Thanks, Chair, for bringing him in. I mean, at the end of the day, we can often puff all we like in relation to this, and I think I feel like huffing and puffing a little bit because at the end of the day, you know, we can't put 500,000 tons of sand back into the ground, and you know, the situation is what the situation is. But I too am concerned in relation to the previous discussions in relation, or the informal discussions in relation to this. I mean, I just wonder if I'm hoping that our officers didn't say, well, carry on and get on with your extraction and then put put an application at some later point, and then retrospectively we'll be able to grant it, because there'll be 81 jobs finishing if you don't carry on, and the environmental impact will be as such that things are going to be delayed a little bit. But I think that the company made a conscious decision to carry on extraction, albeit that they had informal discussions with our officers for the possibility of not losing the jobs that were actually at risk, rather than apply for a new planning application at that time. Now, the restoration of the environment, as outlined in the report, I mean, up in that area, if you know it, there is an extensive piece of scientifically special heathland, and to actually lose an opportunity to recreate another part of that sort of environment, it means that we've lost a valuable and rare environment. And we can't keep on going on and saying we're going to reintroduce areas and make things after extraction, restore them to how they were, and then just say, well, things have changed, so therefore we won't do it, but we'll put another environment in place that possibly isn't as good. Now, in Mansfield, we've had a problem in relation to, because it's been mentioned about the cliff faces. We've had a problem at one of the quarries in Mansfield where all the cliff face collapsed. It's slightly different because there were residential properties at the bottom, but I'm just worried that in the future, who's going to take responsibility for those cliff faces in relation to, I know they back up to an area of woodland, but I mean, it's just somebody's land. I mean, we want to be knowing in the future who's actually responsible for that cliff face, because on past evidence, cliff faces are unstable and they can move. And it does create problems for the future. But in saying that, I'm like Councillor, and I'm not particularly happy with passing retrospective planning applications, but obviously there's not much more than huffing and puffing we can do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Henshaw. Yes, and there is a lot of huffing and puffing going on, and quite understandably so. I think we're all very frustrated with the situation we find ourselves in. But what would be the situation with regards to the cliff faces and the long-term responsibility? Because I know it's a 20-year post-work plan, but obviously the place will still be around after 20 years, and will be there forever. Could it be, I mean, do we need to worry about the fact that in goodness knows how many years' time, the council would have to sort it out, for example, as has happened in the other side. But I'll ask Mrs. Gill to come in on this. I can see that Mr. Aldridge is wanting. Are you just wanting to make a point of clarification there? So if you're very brief on that, and then I'll come into to Mrs. Gill.
Yeah, the mineral that's worked is a very hard sandstone to produce the silica sand, unlike the example of the sand face which could collapse. So in terms of, I could go into lots of engineering details. The cliff faces are inspected regularly, the fencing inspected regularly. Over the last 30 years, there's been no sign of any slippage. There is some degree of debris in the far corner of the site, which has been there for some 20 odd years, and it's called Abraham's Corner, with the Abrahams being the name of the family company. So the company will continue to monitor on a regular basis, and I'm quite happy. My recommendation to the company would be that they would make those reports available to County Council if desired. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aldridge. That's very helpful. Thank you. Mrs. Gill.
The site obviously remains in Mansfield Sands ownership, and as Mr. Aldridge said, the site is fenced. It is not a site where there is intended to be public access, so it would be made secure. Whether Mr. Hankin's got anything further on?
Do you want to add anything, Mr. Hankin?
Nothing further to add. I agree with the comments made by Mr. Aldridge. I would point out that unlike the quarry elsewhere in Mansfield, which has collapsed, there's not housing at the base of this. The quarry is at the base of it, and the land at the top is amenity land. So if there was any movement, it wouldn't have the same issues. But this is structurally sound sandstone. There's no reason why it should collapse. Not too dissimilar to maybe Nottingham Castle, which stays in place.
Thank you very much. So, Councillor Camilleri, please.
I'd say I was disappointed, but I'm not even surprised at what's happened, because it's in Mansfield again. And if this was in any other, some of the areas of Nottinghamshire, we would have had a visit to this place, which is a very important place. I live probably half a mile from there. I walked there probably 2 months ago. I had a walk around it. It's a beautiful part of the world. We should have been looking at that. I'm amazed at this retrospective planning permission, and the fact that you all knew that planning permission was needed and it was ignored. And by ignoring that, you stopped us as a committee having a chance to visit this area of natural beauty, to make our recommendations on what we can do, because Mansfield, with respect again, has missed out many, many times on this. And companies like the Mansfield Sand Company have been there for 170 years, and they've been part of the problem over the years. They've dug out the sand, made the money out of the town, and they should have known better. With respect, they should have got us involved. I'm not getting on to you. I understand about the jobs, but that's no excuse. Absolutely none. If they knew their planning permission was going to run out, they should have approved it. And if we knew as a council that their planning permission was run out, we should have done it. So I don't know how you can often puff like we are doing now. We're grandstanding like that. But I'm a Mansfield councillor, Mansfield lad. It's a part of my town. And I know for a fact that if this had been anywhere else in Nottinghamshire, I mean, we've got a planning coming up quite shortly, soon, from somewhere else where I've had 500 letters in objection. No, wouldn't even have no objections, because it's not been out there, has it? There's been no planning permission requested. There's been nobody can put an object. There's been a few letters gone out. That's it. I would object to it. There are people look at that quarry. There are people watch you working from the houses across road, aren't they? There are going to be new houses built there soon, aren't they? On the new part, am I right? Where the old Mansfield Golf Club is the new development going there? Going to be facing your place? We should have had a hand in it. Like I say, disappointed, but not surprised. And I'm amazed that a Mansfield company of 170 years would have known better and got us involved. That's. I'm not against Mansfield Sand, and I appreciate the jobs, but we should have known about it. Thank you.
Thank you. I would try and reassure you and sincerely hope that what you're saying about the fact it happens to be Mansfield means it's not being treated or respected as well as any other area. And I am sure that is the case. But as was alluded to earlier on, I think in this situation or situations like this, lessons have been learnt, or if not, they certainly need to be learned, so that we're hopefully not in a future situation where we're discussing a retrospective application like this, because there is no doubt about it. There is real annoyance and frustration from committee here, and you can understand that completely. I think there's probably no need to say further on that, but plainly, with regards to whether we do site visits or not, maybe that's something we need to look at as a policy of the council and the way we work forward. Mr. Aldridge, you've got your hand up. Just pop your mic.
I'm not employed by the company. I'm a planning consultant. However, I take responsibility in part for what's happened, because I have been working for them for many, many years. Having said that, it is a very unfortunate situation. I am not particularly pleased with having to make a retrospective application. You say lessons have been learned. They absolutely have. We are in complete discussion at all times now with the professional officers of the council regarding Oaks Quarry. Oaks has a long life, and we will be looking in future to replace it with another site. I would be delighted if councillors would like to visit either Ratchet Hill or Oaks Quarry, and a visit can be arranged, because we have learned a lesson. Everybody's disappointed. I don't blame them at all for that. And my part of the future is to make sure that never, ever happens again.
Thank you, Mr. Aldridge. It's unusual to let you back in, but that, I think we're all very grateful for that offer there. Councillor Camilleri, you raised the point in particular. What would you like to say on that?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, and I think that in future, that anything that happens up our neck of the woods, we get to know about it. Mansfield needs all the care and attention that it has. It's been neglected a long time. And it's time that we looked after the area and got it up to a good standard. And this is the start. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Camilleri. But I would also remind members that we don't just look after Mansfield, we look after the whole of Nottinghamshire and every part of Nottinghamshire.
But my job's to look after Mansfield.
Yeah, it is,
yeah.
but you are also here looking at the bigger picture of Nottinghamshire as well. But I understand completely what you're saying, and I also think the committee would thank Ms. Hugh for the offer of a site visit, because we genuinely find these interesting, and they do help. Obviously, not in this case a decision-making process, but in other applications they do. Mrs. Gill, sorry I interrupted you. Or maybe there's no need to come back. Or
no, I think we've moved on now.
Yeah. Okay. So my next speaker is Councillor Upton, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't want to repeat the points I jotted down because most of them have been made by Councillor Owen very, very eloquently. So I'll try and concentrate on a few new points, really. Principally, it's nearly 6 years, by my reckoning, since this extraction, this extra 558,000 tonnes was taken out. I mean, it's the time frame that concerns me. Why has it taken 6 years to come to us? Point one. I think their lessons need to be learned on the process, but it's not just about this particular project and client. I mean, I think there's a question to be asked about the County Council and its enforcement process on any site across the county. Are the resources there to enforce proactively, or are they reactive? In other words, do we have officers that go out on these large developments that check what's happening is in compliance with the planning approvals? So there's issues around there for me. I hear for the first time that there were these informal communications 6 or 7 years ago about the extra extractions. I understand all the reasons why. I don't have a problem with any of that, but it's the informal part of it, really. I think, for me, I repeat, the lessons should be learned that some of these big issues like this should be formalised at the time and not 6 years down the road. That's an awful long time to wait. And the point about the public perception that the planning laws are being, if you like, got around by retrospective permissions. I think it's a big shame that the heathland aspect of this case, that there is very little natural heathland in the county of Nottinghamshire, as I understand it. And originally the proposal was that some of this would be reinstated, and clearly that can't happen now, so that's gone. I understand the new habitat will be valuable, but it won't be natural heathland. I think that's all I really want to say, really. It's the 6-year time frame. The informal agreement should be made formal, and what is the position? This is the question, really, for the officer. What enforcement regime do we have? Is it proactive or reactive on large schemes such as this? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Upton. Mrs. Gill, would you like to pick up on those?
I will answer the Councillor Upton's final point, and I'll revert to Mr. Hanking in terms of this planning application. The County Council's monitoring enforcement team, they are both, unfortunately it's a very small team, and they are both proactive and reactive. They regularly monitor large mineral extraction sites up and down the county, so they make a number of visits a year with the operator to see what's going on. The team also responds reactively, so if councillors in their patch notices something happening that they think, hang on, that's not right, and they bring it to the team's attention, then the team will go out. So they do both, but it is only a small team, and we are covering the whole of Nottinghamshire, but they are doing their best all the time. Your detailed questions planning application, I'll revert again to Mike Hankin, who was the case officer.
So, Mr. Hankin.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Gill. Yeah, the reason this application, I believe we received it in 2018, and when the application was originally submitted, it incorporated a proposal to develop, I believe it was about 6-7 hectares of industrial land on the land furthest to the south. It's now detailed as acid grassland restoration. Clearly, there's been changes made to the restoration scheme here as a result of the additional mineral which has come out, which we've acknowledged is partly irreversible. A decision to put industrial development on there is not irreversible. That's a decision of the applicant, and it's something which officers very strongly opposed. Why this point is critical to the 6-year period since they did the works is that industrial allocation was actually put forward as an allocation in the Mansfield local plan, and it was preferred. It was a preferred allocation in the Mansfield local plan examination process. Officers of the council, myself, attended that local plan examination alongside the Wildlife Trust and the county ecologist, and we strongly oppose that development. Our reason for opposing that development was because of the loss of habitat which would have resulted from this development. Local plan examination processes take some time. I believe the decision on the Mansfield local plan was it late 20 or something, 21, earlier this year. Once the final decision was made not to allocate that site, officers went back to the developer and said, look, we want habitat there, and that's what provided habitat. So the reason this application has been on the council's books for a long time is because we were trying to get ecological enhancements on the site. In terms of the heathland habitat, there is less heathland habitat on it, but there is a mosaic of habitats on here which will complement the Sherwood Forest area to the east of the site. We do consult ecologists on the application, principally Natural England, who basically are the guardians for protecting the environment. They don't object to this development, and I think it should be pointed that yes, there is a loss of heathland, but this restoration scheme here will still provide significant ecological enhancements for the wider area. It will complement the areas. There is slightly less heathland, but the wetland areas, the areas of willow planting, have ecological value themselves. They are good habitats, and this restoration scheme, officers are satisfied it is still a good restoration scheme, albeit a little less heathland, a little bit more of a mosaic of habitats. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hankin. Councillor Ogle, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Well, concerns have been expressed justifiably by councillors. So, but we've got some recommendations here. And as has been said, it's retrospective. And for me, and I'm assuming, would the original application have been likely to have been granted? Well, from what we're hearing, it would have been, but I would like some reassurance before I stick my hand up for it that planning permission would have been granted originally, because that is the legal issue here, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Ogle. I suppose really, technically speaking, you can't talk about a planning application that's not there or decide on the what-if scenario, can you? Would you like to clarify that, Mrs. Clack? Am I right in that? Or is there a better way of explaining that?
I think, thank you, Chair. I think as members I'm sure are well aware, they can only consider applications which come before them for determination, which is, I think, which we've heard about the problems which arise when that doesn't happen. So, so we didn't receive an application until after the event, and but we can only determine the application that is before us now.
And that, Councillor Ogle, is the legal answer to your query, which is a very understandable question, but you can only discuss and decide on an application that is in place at the time and the information you have in front of you. Thank you. Councillor Upton,
Thank you, Chairman.
Yes,
I just wanted to thank Mike Hankin for explaining to me why there was the 6 years time delay, because I understand now, but reading the report, there was nothing about that. And it would have been nice, in my opinion, to have had a small paragraph in the report to say there was a delay for the Mansfield local plan, I think he said, that took some time. Ergo, this is why it's taken 6 years to get to where we are now. I didn't know that. Now I know it. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from colleagues? I suspect not. So we'll come towards making a decision on this. I think everyone's got the message that we're frustrated on this for reasons which I won't go over again. Lessons need to be learnt and have been learnt, but to coin an old phrase, we are where we are. I wonder whether it's feasible or practical, certainly on big applications like this, to at some point have little regular updates as to where little reports. I know we get snowed under with reports one way or another, but perhaps we need to have a discussion that find a way perhaps of just giving members an update as to major applications such as this. Where are we? What's happened? What hasn't happened that should happen, and so on and so forth. I just wonder whether it might be feasible to do something like this for this in particular.
Thank you, Chair. I think that's something we can look at. The next report that members will be considering is entitled the Development Management Progress Report. So if members want some information on applications that they don't feel we're presenting in the report as it's currently set out, and then I think that's something we can look at doing.
Thank you. That's very helpful. So yes, I think that's something we do need to look at. So colleagues, we'll come to a decision on this. We've got the recommendation. We've had a good discussion. Show of hands, please, for those in favour. Thank you. I think that's, but for the record, anyone against? No one against. And I don't think there were any abstentions, so that's unanimous. So permission is granted. And thank you, Mr. Aldridge, again for joining us. And I'm sure you've taken back some strong feelings from the committee. And we look forward to potential site visits as well. And
I'd like to get those underway as soon as possible, subject to councillors' diaries. And yes, if Mr. Hankin or Jonathan Smith will liaise with myself or company director and secretary Abraham, then we can organise that. Two Alex of the show, please.
Chairman, I'll use microphone if it's going to speak.
No, thank you, Mr. Aldridge. So for benefit of people listening or tuning in who may not have heard that, because his microphone wasn't working, Mr. Aldridge is going to arrange a liaise with the officers and colleagues to arrange site visits and has taken very much on board the observations of this committee. So thank you very much. Right, so we'll move on to item 6, which is for noting. This is the Development Management progress report, and do I need to? Yes, do I move this? Don't I think yes. So I need to formally move item 6. Do I have a seconder, please, Councillor Fielding?
Formally second.
Formally second. Thank you very much. And Mrs. Gill, please, do you just
thank you,
tell us about
Chairman.
this.
This report sets out the applications we've received and the applications we've recently determined. If members have any questions on any individual applications, we'd be very pleased to answer them. We will also draw your attention in the paper that we're undertaking a review of the County Council's validation local list, and members should have received some correspondence about this. This is the list. When we receive a planning application, we check that that planning application has got all the bits that we need in order to start considering it, start determining it, ready to bring it to members for a decision if appropriate. We are, as I said, we've invited comments from members, and we're carrying out a little bit of wider consultation, and we will be bringing a paper to you in January with suggested revisions to our local list. So that's a very exciting report for you all to look forward to. Thank you, Chair.
All reports are exciting. They really are.
This one is particularly exciting.
But as you alluded to a few moments ago on the previous item, as part of future development management reports, we can look towards having the Ratchet Quarry, I think, as regular updates on there. Do any members have any comments, questions? No. So I think it's for noting, but we better just formalise it. So all those in favour of the report, please show. So that's unanimous. Thank you. And so unless I'm very much mistaken, I think that's the last item on the agenda, isn't it? So thank you. Yeah, it's been an interesting meeting, a fairly short one item, but never ever let it be said, even if you only got one item on an agenda, it's going to be quick and easy. But I think it's very important matters were picked up this morning, not just about the Ratchet Quarry, but about the way we work in general, so that they've been taken on board. Can I remind members about site visits in general, though? We're looking forward to one at Ratchet Quarry, which we've just arranged, or started to arrange. But don't forget that we have had site visits for other sites and applications in the past, and with the possible exception of the energy from waste site visit we had a few months ago. I know we're all very busy and diaries will always clash, but can we just bear in mind the importance of site visits when they're offered to us? For various reasons, not all members could get to the one we had at another quarry at Bantycock a few weeks ago. And but these site visits are genuinely useful, and they do form part of the decision-making process. So just keep that in the mind. Councillor Owen, you want to come in?
Yeah, bearing that in mind, when the site visits are being arranged, can the County Council diary be consulted? Because all our meetings should have been put in. Some of us also have district council meetings as well, but that's not they aren't usually during the daytime, so that there isn't a clash. It would help. It's no good organising a site visit if some of us are required at committee meetings.
Absolutely, yes, and if the diaries aren't checked or the council diary isn't checked already, which I think it probably is, but if it's not, then I'm sure that that message is received and noted by those who need to. Right, so with no other items, we'll close the meeting 11:26. Thank you very much for your attendance and contributions, and safe journeys home. Thank you.